This is Jen. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first Thoughtful Thursday. This is really a space where I'm going to go deep, I'm going to get real. I'm going to share with you my personal journey and my mission and the tools that I use every day to experience transformation and basically just to cope with life. And I'm going to admit I'm nervous and I've been preparing a long time for this. Notice the setting. And I hope that you enjoy. And if you have any comments or questions or anything, leave them below and I'll try and answer. So I have a really big mission, and I believe that everyone has a big mission. And I was basically fortunate enough to go through crisis, the breakdown, at a really early age, which was what enabled me to realize my mission. And I want to share with you that story, what the mission is, why I'm here, and how we can connect deeper. So basically, my journey started when I was 16 years old. And I had been diagnosed with depression when I was 15. And my life was a mess. I was really unhealthy. I was medicating with substances. I was drinking a lot. I was just really lost and had no idea how to cope with all of the things that I was feeling. And I was, in high school, there was just a lot going on, and I felt really disconnected, and I felt like I didn't have a core, I didn't know the core of who I was, and I was just really influenced by everything going on around me, but I was always really sensitive, so whenever I would drink or smoke, I would get really affected, and it was just a very messy situation. I didn't really have self-respect, I didn't know how to treat myself around men, and it got really bad. And my parents basically, when I was 16 years old, in the middle of the winter in March 9th, 2007, they basically pulled me out of high school and they sent me through a therapeutic program. It was the middle of the night, 3:30 in the morning, maybe the middle of the morning, the early morning. And I woke up to two strangers in the door of my room, and I close my eyes so that I can get really into it. So I'm not leaving you, I'm accessing the story. So there were two strangers in the door, hovering kind of in the doorway, and my mother at the foot of my bed. And just like that, I was taken away. And my parents did it that way because they knew that if they had proposed the idea to me to go to a therapeutic place, that I would have either ran away or put up a fight. So they just organized this, and I'm really thankful they did, because again, I would not have gone. And so I was going to Georgia. I found out that I was going to a wilderness program, and that's where I ended up. I ended up living in the wilderness for 9.5 weeks, a program called Second Nature Blue Ridge. And I lived outside. I didn't shower, okay? I used a bucket. It was called a billy bath. That's some hillbilly lingo for using a bucket and finding a river, okay? And I was cold and there was snow, and I was just completely pulled out of my element, right? I had a Sweet 16 planned for that weekend. It was a Friday. I had already bought my bag of weed. I knew who I was gonna kiss, and it was just nope, stop, brakes. And so I ended up staying in the woods again for 9.5 weeks. And that was really just to pull back all of the distractions. It was like to get really simple and just out of all of the distractions of society in a really safe therapeutic space. And so I was with anywhere between 15 to 20 other girls who were going through all different types of things. Again, I really went because I had depression, because I was not coping with it healthfully, because I was self-destructive, and my parents felt like I wasn't safe at home. There were other people going through a lot of different things, but we basically went through this experience together, and it was really simple. We would hike, we would eat, we slept in tents that we had to make, like little A-frame things with our sleeping bag. And it was just, again, really to get into nature and get into ourselves and just really begin to recognize that we needed to change our lives. At the time, the woods was, when I first got there, I was really depressed. I already was depressed, but to be pulled out of my life like that was really scary, and I had no control. I had zero control. The only control that I had, people always ask me, did you put up a fight? Did you rebel? And people always ask me that, and I say no. I say my point of power was in complying. My point of power was in choosing to just do what they said and go with the flow, even though inside I was so scared. So whereas other people were fighting and maybe even like physically beating up or trying to these like big butch people, the transporters who took you, or like rebel against the program, I just went with everything. That's not to say that I wasn't really depressed doing it, but I just did. And so the woods, even though it was really depressing at first, ended up being so cathartic, so beautiful, so simple. It was like simultaneously feeling really good and being present, and then being like, when am I gonna get the fuck out of here? It was like that every day. Like, I'm okay. Oh my God, I'm okay. Oh my God. But compared with what I went through after, it was actually very, very relaxed and wholesome. I'm sorry if I'm getting distracted. This is a big story. If you can see, my face has hives because this is like so real for me. So I'm reading your comments too. If I get off track, just let me know. So in the woods, it was really, therapy based, but not really in a super intense way. It was kind of just getting us to begin to look at our behavior. And we found out pretty quickly while we were there that most of us were not going home. So what does that mean? So very few people from that program go back home back right into their lives, because you don't really get to do all of the work while you're in the woods. It's kind of just the buffer period to prepare you for the work. What is the work? Going in, looking at yourself, getting real, looking at your behaviors, seeing what you're running from. That's the work. And so I found out that I was not going home and that I was going to a therapeutic boarding school. And I was really afraid because there was a girl in my program in the woods who had gotten kicked out of the school that I was going to. And no one wanted to go to this school because she talked about it. She said people were brainwashed and it was scary. And so I really did not want to go to this place. But of course, my parents chose it. And so I went to this school in Virginia called Carlbrook. And I ended up being there for a total of 19 months. So I was in the woods for over 2 months, and then the boarding school for Yes, 19 months. So I was away for almost 2 years. And at the boarding school, it was, let me find the words. Was simultaneously offered some of the most vulnerable and beautiful moments where I really shared my soul with people in ways that I might never be able to do again. And it was also incredibly scary. I don't blame anyone or I don't blame anything, but the way that it was run was kind of fear-based and shaming. And there's a lot to say about it, but basically the whole theory behind it was getting you really, again, to look at the core of what you were doing and why, and to get you to recognize that you weren't behaving healthfully or treating yourself well or taking care of yourself, and to kind of almost break you down to then build you back up. And while this is a beautiful idea, the issue is that there were people of all different backgrounds, all different coping mechanisms and issues, going through the same experience together, the same exercises. So I, if you can't notice, am a highly sensitive person, and I'm very susceptible to my environment, and I have a different threshold than someone who really has no conscience. And so we were all put through the same things. And so while this, again, it's complicated to talk about because it was the starting point of my journey and I'm so grateful for it, but it also was incredibly traumatic for me, which is really interesting because I'm supposed to be in this place that is cathartic and supportive and healing, and it's also actually kind of adding more shit onto my plate. And so what do I mean by that? So there was one workshop. So the way that the structure of the program went is that there were workshops, and you basically progress through the school by going through these workshops. And there was one workshop in particular. I won't really get into the details of it, but I will just say that it was incredibly traumatic for me. And no, I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD, but I kind of self-diagnosed myself from that. And so there was something that happened and I didn't feel safe. And I freaked out internally, and I didn't feel like I could express it. I didn't feel like I could share it. And so this anxiety that was really created was kind of put on top of everything else. So it's complicated because I was uncovering so much, but then I also was developing a lot of anxiety because of the structure of the program. So I basically went through the whole program getting clearer about my behavior and the pain that I was going through, and also creating a lot of anxiety around my behavior. And there was one woman that I met there who was really a spiritual woman. I still credit her to a lot of my journey. And she basically, while throughout the program there were a lot of times where I didn't feel safe because it was so kind of yelling and fear-based, I felt very safe with her. I felt very safe around her because of her mentality, her connection to spirit and to herself. And so her connection to spirit really planted a seed within me that this was something I wanted to explore further. And Also, at this time, I had been on and off all sorts of medication because I had depression. So while the medication was helping in some ways, in other ways it wasn't, because what I realized later was that the core of this added anxiety was a blockage and an energetic blockage, that I didn't feel safe in expressing myself and in communicating and in sharing my truth. So when I graduated this school, I, throughout the experience, had basically developed this, it's hard to talk about, but it was like almost like a physical, like the anxiety was not just in my head, but it was physical, and it manifested as this physical ball in my throat. And so I spent my whole time after school, after I graduated from the program, figuring out how to cope with this physical, it felt like a tennis ball in my throat, this physical anxiety. And that, wanting to cope with that, needing to, feeling like if I didn't, I was just in this perpetual state of anxiety and feeling like I was suffocating. It was almost like a perpetual panic attack, that I needed something to help with that. And that is really what got me searching for alternative modalities, because I had been on and off medication. It wasn't helping. And I wanted to know what this was. And I will also disclose this. Because the panic attacks, they were actually starting to manifest into full-on panic attacks, I started to take Xanax. And whenever I would take Xanax, I would get really emotional and I would cry. And so I realized that this thing inside, this anxiety, was just bottled up emotion. And so I set out on this path to figure out ways to release this emotion, this stored emotion. And so the first woman that really helped me with this was, I went to a psychic medium, and in a lot of ways she took a lot of money from me and kind of exploited my vulnerability. But in other ways, she really began to help me recognize that this was an energetic imbalance. Not that my depression was necessarily, but that the added anxiety from the school and the program was this blocked energy. And she really introduced me to the chakras. She started using the word chakra. I had no idea what this was, but then again, I knew. It was like a familiar thing. If you believe in past lives, it was like, yeah, I know that. I'm remembering that. And so when I was at Skidmore, I went to Skidmore College. I was supposed to go to Boston University, but because I had not handled this anxiety, when I stepped on campus, it was way too much for me. So I took the semester off and started at Skidmore in January, and as opposed to in August. January of, I don't even know. Yeah, 10. And so while I was at Skidmore, because of my work with this woman, I had started to get really into or interested in these holistic modalities. And then when I was at Skidmore, I threaded that through this like exploration into my studies. And so I went to Skidmore thinking I was going to major in, in psychology and English. And I just knew that I wanted to, it was really from, again, a place of personal seeking, knowing that I wanted to understand myself and my own behavior and ways that I could heal, and wanting to understand that about people. So I started studying psychology, I started studying English, and by the end of it, I had double majored in philosophy and religion. And the reason why I chose that is because it's actually this one experience where I was in psychology of religion and then existential philosophy back to back. And psychology of religion, in my opinion, was so like sterile and limited because we would talk about these really obvious things that were like based on the scientific method. And then I would go into existential philosophy and it was like what is the meaning of life, and is there God, and what are we doing here? And I was like, hell yeah, sign me up for that. So dropped psychology, took on philosophy, integrated it with religion, because my passion again is really the philosophies of different spiritualities in an attempt to heal myself. And so while I was studying philosophy and religion, I also went on my own individual quest. So I would go into the town of Saratoga Springs, I would take yoga classes, I would take Reiki, I would meet with acupuncturists. I was just like on this journey. And I really wanted to like acquire this education, like this almost like, yeah, a continuing education while I was in school. And basically, the more that I studied, the more that I opened my eyes to, the more that I realized it was all related. So like the chakras, the energy centers of the body were part of a system that was part of yoga, and that was part of a larger system, that there were medical systems in India and China that actually spoke to the holistic fullness of health and healing. And so it was like I opened Pandora's box. But while this was all happening, I also was trying to be a normal kid and, you know, do what people did in college, go out, smoke a bunch of weed, you know, that's like was the Skidmore thing, go out on weekends. And so I was like kind of torn, and again, like wanting to be normal, like similar to high school but not as extreme, wanting to be normal, but also wanting to really go into this full experience and have my own sort of education. And so that was always a struggle for me. It was like, how do I be normal and do the things that I think I'm supposed to do, but then do these other things that seem healthier and more elevating. And so finally, I just kind of dove full in. Senior year, dove in, wrote a thesis on the subtle body in Tibetan Buddhism, which was really my attempt to study the spiritual in an academic way. So the subtle body, what is that? Again, the chakras, this energy body, I studied that from the perspective of Tibetan Buddhism. And I don't really know how this happened. My friend Cooper, if you ever watch this, Cooper, hey, Cooper Babcock, beautiful human being, was also on a spiritual path, is on a spiritual path. And he started to get really into herbs, plants. He like put these jars of herbs in his dorm room and sent me the website. And I was in the library one day on the 3rd floor, and I just had this revelation. It was like, I was on the website looking at the herbs, and I was like, oh my God, I can buy these herbs in bulk. Bulk was like a pound, which isn't a lot. I can buy these herbs by the pound and just create this apothecary on campus. I'm at Skidmore, people are hippie and alternative, and they would be into it. And for me, like the plants, there was something about the plants and nature that was so that I connected with so deeply. Like this idea that what you need is like all around you. It was like I just wanted to go outside and know what everything was and be able to pick it and use it. I'm still that way. I still really wish that I was like a botanist or something. But yeah, so this growing love for the plants, coupled with my realization that I could just like start something. Also coupled with my parents who are entrepreneurs and who basically always told me that you could do whatever you want, just find your passion and you'll be able to build it. So thank God they said that. That is like such a unique thing to be brought up thinking and believing. But I always knew, I guess, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I wanted to study human behavior and somehow like make my own thing. And so I'm in the library on the 3rd floor on this website, and I just decide to order these herbs. And I partnered with this girl named Kate, who was like a real herbalist. Like you would go into her dorm apartment on campus, and there was like rosemary hanging from the ceiling, and she was like infusing oils on the stove and like things that were, again, so fascinating to me, but also very overwhelming. And we partnered for like a minute, and we created this concept called Skidpothecary. And Skidpothecary was the Skidmore Apothecary. We even made business cards. I don't have one here, but I do have them still. And Skidpothecary was the start of Essential Rose. And this was senior year. Kate actually went and studied abroad, so then it just became me. And so I would be in my apartment, and I'd order like herbs by the pound to the post office, and everyone, like all these people that were super high would be like, what is that? And I'm like, it's chamomile actually. So I'd order chamomile and eucalyptus and lavender and mint and rose, and just started Skidpothecary. And what was that? I was just started to make teas, started to infuse oils on the stove. If any of my housemates ever watch that from this time, you'll probably be laughing because they all thought I was this weird, crazy witch. But they liked it. It was fine. And so from that experience, I was like, this is what I am doing. This is my truth. I don't know how it's going to manifest, but I am going to create a business. And then had a dinner with my mom. We came up with the name. Rose is my middle name. Rose is also the most precious essential oil. It's the hardest to extract. It's the most expensive, or one of the most expensive. So we just came up Essential Rose. I am the Essential Rose, Rose Essential Oil, Essential Rose. So I incorporated this while I was still at Skidmore, writing this thesis, doing my thing. And then when I graduated, before really jumping into Essential Rose, I went kind of on a journey, like, what everyone does when they graduate, and they, like, an existential, I guess my whole life up to this point was a journey. If you've been listening, then you can notice that. But, I did my thing, I traveled, I got certified in yoga, and then I came back. And Essential Rose, it really started as a concept for a tea company. And it was really a lifestyle tea brand. So I was gonna make these blends for different moments of the day. And then that expanded to the beauty. How did that expand? Because I had no formal education in this. I was just blending in my apartment, reading Rosemary Gladstar on my computer, and just trying it out. And the certification that I got was in aromatherapy. And up until that point, I had not really explored essential oils at all. But I decided to do the aromatherapy because it was the most approachable certification. The other herbal certifications were like a really big commitment. They were 8 months or a year, just the intro. The aromatherapy I could do in a week, the intro. But when I did the intro, I was like, oh my God, these oils are amazing. They're so beautiful and so dynamic and so just beyond. And so I decided not only to do the intro, but to do the full 300-hour advanced certification. And that's when I became or that's when Essential Rose became a tea and beauty company. Forward to now, and Essential Rose is still, it's a lifestyle brand. And my mission, and I hope that I articulated this clearly, this was like a lot for me. My face is so hot and so red right now. And there's so much that I didn't even say, but I hope that this portrayed sort of why I'm here. But basically where I'm at right now is wanting Essential Rose to be not just a tea and beauty brand, because the products are great, but if you're not approaching the deeper issues, like the thoughts you're thinking and the things that you feel about yourself, then no matter what plants you're using or what juices you're drinking or practices you're practicing, it's not going to be the most effective thing. And so Essential Rose is more than a product. It's really my attempt to offer tools for full self-connection and transformation. And my mission through Essential Rose, I'm so happy to say this, and it makes me emotional, is to destigmatize mental illness. 1 in 4 people have mental illness, and that's just like documented and diagnosed. 1 in 4 people have diagnosable mental illness or diagnosed mental illness. But I think that everyone has anxiety, and everyone experiences stress, and everyone feels alone and isolated and unsure of how to navigate things at times. Even the most type A structured people get thrown off course. What happens when your train is late, or you're driving and you're stuck in traffic, or someone really close to you dies, or just these things, the terrorist attacks that happen all the time in New York and Las Vegas, and the political arena, and life is stressful, and that's okay. And I am here to be a safe, honest space to say that we all go through it. We all go through it. And this idea of perfection and consistent happiness is an illusion, that it's a roller coaster, that it ebbs and flows, and that you're not alone. That this is pretty normal. Not pretty normal. This is normal. And you're okay and you're safe. So it's really to share that and to live that, and also to offer you tools that I use in my personal life that help me. So again, what happens when there's traffic? What happens when the unthinkable happens? What happens when you're bogged by existential fear because this terrorist attack happened in your city? What do we do? How do we cope? And the truth is that I don't believe there's ever a moment where you're done. I think it's a journey and it's a process. And I am here to be an example of that process and to help guide you through that process and to be a safe space as we explore that together. And eventually what that's going to look like for Essential Rose is not only products and rituals and courses and content and speaking engagements and conferences. It's going to be philanthropic, and it's going to be charitable. I do donate currently, but I want to donate specifically for this cause, for mental illness, for destigmatizing, and going into schools and providing children, not little ones. They're fine, but that's not, it's really the teens, the people that I was that felt so alone when I was 15 years old and self-medicating with alcohol and pot and men, that I didn't have to do that there were other things that I could do if I could just have felt safe enough to share how I was feeling with my peers. And I'm here to create a community, and I'm here to to share my soul. And that's why I'm choosing this platform, because I can't really go as deep on Instagram. There's just not the space or the time or the bandwidth. So here I am. And if you have any questions, if there's anything that didn't make sense, because again, I'm like so on the spot right now, please reach out. Please let me know. Please ask. This is just the beginning. This was the intro. And next week, we're going to go into some tools. I hope you'll join me. Thank you so much. Again, Essential Rose Life, go on my website, essentialroselife.com. Find me on Instagram, @EssentialRoseLife. This is really just the beginning, and I'm so appreciative that you were here, that you tuned in, that you listened, that you watched, that you saw me. And I just want you to know that I'm on the journey with you, and I see you too, and I really love you. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm tuning out for now. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I'll see you next Thursday.